Barcelona defend their throne and remain as the Champions League champions. So let's talk about it. Barcelona have defended their title as the reigning European champions, the reigning Champions League champions, after defeating Lyon 2-0 in the final. This is their second title in a row and third in their history. In fact, they walk away with a quadruple this year, pretty much winning every single trophy that was up for grabs, and doing so in a very, very impressive way. It was, like I mentioned, a 2-0 victory over Lyon with goal scorers from both Ballon d'Or winners of Bonmatí and Alexia Putellas. It was a sold-out stadium in Bilbao. Quite the scene. It certainly looked like it was just blue, red, and some yellow in that crowd. So certainly the Spaniards turned up for this one. It was obviously in Spain, but wow, what a game that was, and what an achievement this is from Barcelona. And I think this win, we are starting to see a little bit of a changing of the guards, perhaps, from Barcelona as this new dynasty, really the team to beat, the best team in Europe. There's no argument about that, which are all previously titles that we have associated with Lyon. And now Barcelona going into the final had never beaten Lyon ever. In fact, in the 2022 final, it was Lyon and Barcelona. As we know, that one, Lyon won and were victorious. In fact, Lyon had not been beaten in a European final since 2014. Now that's a decade ago. That's almost 10 years ago. They have won the Champions League 8 times, the most out of any. Now they are 3-time runner-ups, obviously the 2014 being the most recent. Like I mentioned before that, it was back in 2013 that they lost a final. So again, it has been quite some time since we saw Lyon lose a Champions League final. It's not really a scene that this new generation of watching women's football has seen or has associated Lyon with. But in some ways, we did see this changing of the guard coming. You know, Barcelona are not, I wouldn't really coin them as the new kids on the block that just all of a sudden have come and beaten Lyon, who we have always associated as the best team in Europe, the team to beat in Europe. And we have seen their decline, certainly, but at the same time, it's been a storyline of other teams catching up and other clubs investing, and the likes of Barcelona becoming what they are becoming, this new dynasty, this new kind of legendary squad that's been put together. The tides are turning and Barcelona are here to stay. It's really hard to get to the point to where Barcelona got. It's really hard to get to the top, and it's even harder to stay at the top of the game, which is what I think is Barcelona's biggest challenge now, is staying at the top. This is their title to defend consistently in every single year, and the game is not going to get easier. Women's football in Europe is not going to get any weaker, or it's not going to decline in quality. It's only going to get better, which is only going to make this challenge for them much, much, much harder. But what we have seen is it's Barcelona. It's the team that nobody can beat. Again, granted, Chelsea have beaten them in the semi-final. Chelsea fans, don't come after me for that. They are the team made up of mostly World Cup winners who go into every international competition as the favourites, which, by the way, let's quickly mention what these Spanish players have had to go through from the World Cup and before the World Cup and following the World Cup and everything that has unfolded with the women's. What those players had to endure after the World Cup is not something that any professional athlete should ever go through. And, you know, we're always talking about these players having to have a lot of fights off the pitch, but certainly that takes a toll on them, and it takes a toll on what they have to perform on the pitch. But they've shown us that it doesn't matter what's going on off the pitch. If anything, it's almost like extra motivation for them to just show up in an extra gear. But back to the Champions League, back to the Champions League final that we got to see over the weekend, and back to Lyon. Let's just say bluntly, that was a great, fun final. From the first kick of the ball to the final kick of the ball, it was a great chess match. You got to see two competitive teams. You got to see two teams with their own tactical mind games and battles put it on the pitch and just show us a great game of football. I think for a neutral, this was such a fantastic game because really you had the club with the most Champions League wins, and you have this new dynasty coming up to really take over Europe. And so you have this changing of the guard, and really when you set up that stage, it just does not get better than that. Lyon were absolutely in that match, and I think Lyon had also their great glimpses in their own tactical traps that it looked like they intended to put Barcelona in, but at the same time, I don't think they were in it full enough or hard enough where at one point I was like, yes, they can absolutely defeat Barcelona. And when coming up against a team like Barcelona, you can have all the tactical training that you want, and you can have all the game plan that you want. But to be able to execute that for 90 minutes across is a really, really difficult task, which is why that Chelsea win over Barcelona was just that much more impressive. I think the way they did it, the way they did this in Barcelona's backyard was just, it goes down in the history books in its own way. It broke a lot of records. But to defeat Barcelona is just a tough task nowadays. And again, it's not just tactically, then you're talking about the quality of players. And even if you put quality of players aside, like let's completely separate quality of players of Barcelona and Lyon. It's almost like these Barca players have a mindset or just a philosophy instilled in them that they will not lose. They will take short passes and they will be very patient, but at the same time they will be clinical, they will be deadly, and they showed experience this time around. Now obviously this is not, again, like their first run to win a final. This is their fourth final. Very similar. You look at a lot of these players. They have been on the big stage. They've just won the World Cup. So they are experienced, but it's a different mindset that now we're seeing. It's a different mentality that we're seeing that perhaps was what was lacking when they lost that 2022 final against Lyon. Lyon is the squad, associated with experience, with mentality, with a mindset that they are not going to lose, which was exactly what was reflected in this game, but except with the Barca players. And then on top of that, you add the quality of players that Barcelona have. It's a team made up of greats. 2 Ballon d'Or winners. Again, Alexia Putellas, we'll talk about her in a moment. The way she came on and scored that goal, a week after her contract was extended, after what was a very tough season, having to stay out, having to rehab her injury, to take care of her knee. She's not gotten the starts that she wanted. There was a lot of, crazy rumors flying around that maybe this contract will not get extended. But, let's be honest, Alexia Putellas is going to play for Barcelona. Nobody was going to see her in another shirt. But it was a tough season for her. And the way she came on and beautifully scored that goal, took off the shirt, celebrated, some great scenes of Lucy Bronze holding that shirt and just great pictures that we got to see. But it really kind of encapsulated everything that Alexia Putellas has worked really hard for this season. And for it to come on the big stage, for it to come in the Champions League final, for it to come a week after her contract extension, like these are the beautiful stories that I love when women's football writes. And for Aitana Bonmatí to be the first player that hugged her, and that was the first player that celebrated with her, and it's also her Ballon d'Or, teammate. It's just stuff like that you had to sit back and enjoy. Like, people say it's cinema, but really it is cinema. We see Putellas as almost this very calm, very, collected, composed player. And she absolutely is. The way she handles herself to the media, the way she talks to her teammates. She's a leader. She's a captain. And when you got to see that explosion of joy, that celebration, it was a bit uncharacteristic of Putellas, but she stood up and the crowds went crazy, and seriously, like it evoked so many emotions in the stadium, and for it to come so late in the game, it really was just a great scene for what was a tough season for Putellas. But then again, it was like that was the winner. Like Lyon were not going to come back from 2-0 down at that point. And yeah, it is just, football aside, that was a great scene. But taking a closer look about that game, like I mentioned, I don't think Lyon pressed as aggressively as they should have against Barcelona. But then understandably, Barcelona is a team that if you do not execute your press perfectly, you're going to be bitten back and you're going to really regret some of your decisions and choices, which is why I could understand a little bit of a tentative, perhaps more conservative way of pressing that Lyon approached this game. To be the champion, you got to beat the champion. Lyon came in, they were looking to defeat the reigning champions. And if you don't defeat and come victorious against the champions, and I say this, obviously you gotta beat the champion to be the champion, but you've got to put on a performance where you are legitimately crowned as the champions. And in those final 10 minutes, it was like, right, we're getting really, really close to the final thing. It's 1-0. Are we gonna see some crazy comeback here? But Lyon just didn't look like they had it in them in those final 10 minutes. And so, talking a little bit back on their press, don't think they were pressing as aggressively. Again, I can understand the conservative perspective and approach to things, but it's a final. If you're going to go big or go home, that's the time to do it. We got to see both Daniela Van de Donk and Lindsay Horan have to drop deeper than maybe they wanted to. They had to drop deep and wide even to stop Barcelona's 2v1 build-up, and they kind of turned it into a 3v2 for their own advantage. I wish I can put some of that footage here, but DAZN would definitely get me. But Lindsay Horan and Van de Donk playing deeper and wider to utilize the fact that they would have more players defending Barcelona's build-up, I think was really fun. It made for a very tactical, fun matchup to see how Barcelona were trying to get out of that. And ultimately, that did cause them a lot of problems. So from Lyon's perspective, that was great. I thought Damaris had a great game as well. I think Damaris is a player that there was a lot of games that she wasn't starting, and I scratched my head as to why she wasn't starting. And this final, again, gave me another head scratcher of why was she not starting on some of those other big games. I've really enjoyed seeing how her game has evolved in that Lyon midfield. I think she's a superb midfielder. It was weird to see some of the DAZN commentators saying she plays for Spain, because she doesn't. She did at one point, but she plays for the Dutch national team. But anyway, that midfield fun, it was fun. Yeah, midfield fun, I'm gonna call it fun. But speaking of those wide players, Bruns caused a lot of problems when she would roam into the midfield and she would invert into the midfield. And again, interestingly, when she would go into the midfield, you saw Carolina Graham Hansen kind of drop as a fullback, and it just showed you that Girldus knows the importance of blocking Lyon's midfield trio. You had to bring in Lucy Bruns in there, and you still had to find some coverage on the wing, because Carpenter and Bacha will get you in there fast. And so that was a very tactical, fun matchup to see. Speaking of the midfield, though, I thought Horan and Damaris should have been a little bit better in possession when they did get the ball. But once again, when you have a player like Kara Walsh, for example, and Bonmatí coming and gunning at you, I can understand why you would crumble a little bit under the pressure. Nonetheless, it was exciting to see how they set up that midfield and how both of the coaches recognized that a lot of that threat from the opposition was going to come from the midfield. I think if Horan and Damaris were a little bit better in possession, maybe we could have seen one or two more dangerous balls that really would have maybe put Barcelona on the edge. You gotta also give it up for Salma Bacha. I mean, what a player that she's so creative. She's so good at either playing as a winger or a fullback, and we have a lot of those players now in the modern game, and maybe it's frustrating for them to have to execute those defensive duties because they're so good when they're going forward. But man, she had no easy feat. Going up against Carolina Graham Hansen is not an easy player. I think many defenders in the game would tell you that Carolina Graham Hansen is the player that they do not want to go up against. But Bacha put in a great shift. And really, if there was a player to put up a great shift against Carolina Graham Hansen, it had to be Bacha. So that was also extremely fun to see. Aitana Bonmatí obviously named as a player of the match, the MVP of the tournament. This is the second time it's happened in a row. She was just as valuable last year. And really, again, that's what happens when you have the two Ballon d'Or winners on your team. I think there was a big question in my head of what if Ada Hegerberg had been fitter, and what if she had played those minutes, 2 games before, would we have gotten to see more of her? Unfortunately, that's the name of the game where there's injuries you got to deal with. Everybody knows the quality of Ada Hegerberg, how dangerous she is. And what I've just listed about the philosophy and the mentality of Barcelona players, she embodies all of it. She's not a Barcelona player, but she's a winner. She is a tough player. She has been in those big moments, and she's known to score. Great players are judged by what they can do on the big stage, which is why it's just that much more iconic that we got to see both Ballon d'Or players got on the score sheet. And that is why Ada Hegerberg has cemented herself as a great player, because she has always stepped up on the big stage. Like I mentioned, we didn't get to see her injury-free and fully fit. Maybe that could have been a bit of a different story. However, I kind of doubt it. But for Lyon to make it into yet another final in a season that they've not looked their best, there has been a lot of rocky performances, perhaps below par performances, is just a testament to their ability. It'll be exciting to see how they look next year, with a different head coach, now with Sonia Pampaster. She'll be heading to Chelsea. But for Barcelona to win a quadruple, second time in their history, every player was exceptional this season. They've had to deal with injuries, like I mentioned, Mapper Lyon completely out, Alexia Putellas with her knee. Every player was exceptional. I'm not going to sit here and talk about how every single player was exceptional, because you got to be when you're winning a quadruple, and I've enjoyed watching a lot of them, but I do have to give a big shout out. I think personally, I've particularly enjoyed watching Ingrid Ingen and her conversion to a center back. I think that's the best we have seen her. This is the best season I think we have seen in a Barcelona shirt for her. We've been conditioned to see her as a defensive center mid or just a midfielder, but really how she's ramped up her game and shown us her best qualities as a center back has been very fun to watch. That partnership that she's built with Irene Paredes, I also thought the way that they were building in that Lyon game, herself, Catacol, and Paredes in that triangle was exceptional. So confident, so it's like they just know where each other are going to be. And Irene Paredes, in my eyes, had a brilliant game, probably the best of her season. You can again look back to that goal line clearance that she had in the opening 10-15 minutes. Yeah, if that went in, we could have completely seen a different game. So Catacol too, to come in the way that she's come in, she looked so comfortable. And I think maybe a quality that has not been properly praised is the way she jumps out to catch crosses and set pieces. She was exceptional with Spain and the World Cup on that, and just showed us again that she is just as exceptional on the big stage with Barcelona. So gotta give it up to that back three. Overall, it was a fun game of football. I think the Champions League final is always so special, and to see every single year how it grows and continues to get bigger with the crowds, with the turn up. We haven't seen the viewership numbers yet, but I've no doubt in my mind that it broke pretty much every record that had been set. This Champions League season has also been fun. We got to see different teams. We got to see different styles of football because we got to see different teams. The no Wolfsburg, no Arsenal was also... It added another layer of, okay, let's just see what those teams are about. And it was fantastic. Ajax, what a run they had. That opening game that they defeated PSG on was fun. Frankfurt, we got to see them. Benfica, once again, every year they just improve. And unfortunately, every year they also get grouped with Barcelona. So hopefully next year they don't have to play Barcelona. But yeah, I mean, it has been such a fun season, and Barcelona just, now they're at the top of the game. They're the team to beat. They're the European champions. They are the World Cup champions. Like, it's the new dynasty, and it's like, if you want to win the Champions League, you best be planning and working really hard to know how you can break that chess game, whatever it is. Let me know how much you enjoy the final. What have you thought of Barcelona, Lyon? Are we gonna get to see those two hit it again next season, perhaps against each other in the final? Maybe not. Would love to hear your opinions on that. As always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure to subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter, and I will see you later.